Welcome back to yet another installment of A People's Guide to Publishing. I am your host, Joe Beal, the autistic publisher, and this is Elly Blue, my foil for all things argumentative.
I know I'm not.
As you can see.
We're quite a team, so today we're going to talk to you about a very important topic, which is, now you've published this book, how do people find them? Mm-hmm. We're assuming that you have a website. If you don't, something to consider.
First piece of information to making your books get found is to really thinking about who would find them, how they would find them, what they would be looking for in order to find them, and leaving them an adequate trail of breadcrumbs all the way to your books.
So there's a number of different angles you can choose, and I think we're not going to talk so much about like publicity and like outreach that you do, where you go and you're like telling people about your books and having them link back to your website. But of course, that is always a best practice. Whenever someone writes about your books, ask them to link back directly to you and not to the big A. The part of that we're going to talk about right now is how to like create conditions on your website that allow people who are using a search engine to find your books, and we call that search engine optimization, which is really a cheesy term, but it basically just means, what does it mean, Joe?
It just means that you've set up your website to be findable when someone searches for it. And that can be everything from, just using the right keywords on your blog posts that are targeted to what your audience is interested in. Because the worst thing you can do, you might have stumbled upon these websites sometimes that are like just obviously a bunch of copy-pasted gobbledygook from news sites and personal websites, and what they're trying to do is just be a trap for getting people to accidentally click on that. And so that doesn't actually help unless your only point is to get people to accidentally come to your website. Whereas in your case, you want people to come there, be interested in what they find there, and buy something. So ideally, you want to be authentic, you want to be clear, and you want to be actionable.
And you want to not repeat yourself a lot.
Mm-hmm. Which we will also try to do on this podcast.
So the first aspect of that is the content on the front end of your website. And because book descriptions are by nature repetitive, you'll probably have the same book description on your website as there is on any other place in the universe that talks about your book. And some so-called newspapers or news websites will just reprint your book description as their review, literally, I swear. But that means you just need to have more content that is not a repeat of that. You need to have like a really good description of your company, and it should include any keywords that describe your company, so that when people search for feminist science publisher, for instance, or Latinx in publishing queer YA novels, that they'll find your website if that's what you do. So that's super important to have that really prominently on your front end and also in your metadata. And then it's also really important to do that for all of your books. And like the title, like having keywords in your title is really great. You gotta also have them in your description. If you have a book about monks, you need to kind of like use the word monk as prominently as possible, for instance. You can't just have a book that's called like To See the Light and expect people to find it unless the author is very famous.
Even then.
Yeah, really. And
you also want to use related keywords to like further drill down on like what kind of monking you're doing, what kind of monkishness you're all about, that kind of thing.
And that way when people are searching for information and your book has the information they need, they'll find you.
Mm-hmm. And then on like a very basic level, like as you can see on this can, it says coconut. It's like the second largest piece of information below the brand name. And so that is in itself search engine optimization, because when you're in the grocery store, you're like, coconut. That is a flavor I enjoy in fruit and in candy and in other things that I eat. Let's try coconut flavor.
The grocery store is definitely optimized for your brain to search.
Mm-hmm. And then when you get to thinking that way, you'll painfully notice all the things that are right and wrong about all kinds of products and books in your immediate environment.
So go off and do that and, keep working at it till you get it right. One last note about that, though, is the back end. And we're getting kind of into technical stuff that honestly changes every year and isn't always stuff that is obvious. Like there are some more obvious things like on all websites, there's a lot of things called alt text fields. A lot of images have alt text fields. This is important for accessibility as well as for search engine optimization. And honestly, these two things, like the more accessible your website, the more likely Google is to crawl it. So, and the more likely people with visual and reading disabilities are going to be able to find your books and access your content. So you need to make sure you always fill those out with visual descriptions. Google best practices for this stuff. It's important to do. It will help a lot. There's also alt text for sort of major areas of your website, like your headers and your important pages, which I highly recommend filling out. And then just kind of every year on January, I have a task to search for like, what are the new best practices for search engine optimization? There's always something new. A few years ago, we learned that Google was going to literally stop indexing sites that were not mobile compatible, which means that like if you tried to open it on your screen, it'll just be like the whole website, but really small. Like Google really wants your website to like kind of change its shape and be laid out for a smaller phone or an iPad screen. And that literally has a huge impact on your findability, and it does often mean you need to like redesign your website and spend resources on that, but it's also worth it because then people can find your books
and buy them. Google is fortunately very helpful in Googling what are the best practices for appearing on Google, because Google wants you to succeed at Googling Google. Google. Lastly, this is a brand new thing that we made. We just got it in from the printer yesterday, and boy, do 20,000 of them have an odor with all the ink in the paper. It tells our story. It answers a lot of questions. We can leave them in public places where people can find them, and then they can unfold them, and ta-da! It answers all the frequently asked questions about publishing and replaces Elly and I. Isn't that nice? These are some of the books we publish.
And this is another way people can find our book without even using search engines.
And it's also an infographic where the largest books are the ones that have been the most popular, so they're the easiest ones to spot on there, and it just makes it more fun. And then on this side, it's all frequently asked questions about Microcosm and about publishing in general.
It's our poster catalog / IRL Google.
So once again, this has been A People's Guide to Publishing. I am your host, Joe Beal, the Autistic Publisher.
I'm Elly Blue, sometimes the voice of reason.
Sometimes something else. We'll mix that one up.
You can find us online at microcosm.pub. We are not a public house, but a publishing company. Somebody asked that recently. We don't sell beer, sorry. You can also find us on Twitter at Microcosm, on Facebook at Microcosm Publishing, on Instagram at Microcosm_pub, and here in Portland on North Williams Avenue.
Thank you so much.